Welcome to Spiritual Psychology. My name's Renee Lavallee Mckenna, and I bring my 30-plus years as a recovering addict and ex-crazy person turned therapist and shamanic healer to bring you snackable teachings on spirituality, psychology, and all things personal growth. And today I want to talk about spiritual psychology and how it differs from regular Western psychology. Spiritual psychology, as the name suggests, is a blend of spirituality and science. It uses elements of traditional psychology and spirituality to help people feel better and be more content with their lives and help them integrate, understand, or even encourage the transcendent aspects of the human experience. I got my master's degree in transpersonal psychology, and transpersonal is often used as another word for spiritual. And the idea of the transpersonal or the spiritual addresses aspects of ourself as part of a greater whole, in the realization or experience that our psyche is developing beyond the conventional understanding of our personal or individual experience, that we're connected with something greater than ourselves. Whether we understand that as our connection with the greater system of humankind, or the earth and nature, or the universal life force, or all of those. And spiritual psychology has been around in one form or another for millennia. And the mystical traditions of all great religions, Buddhism, Hinduism, mystical Christianity, and Sufism, the mystical arm of Islam, all wrestle with this interplay between human suffering and divine ecstasy. And each human life is a complex configuration and a very unique experience of our own relationship with the profane and the ecstatic, with fear and isolation and suffering, and our struggle as we seek peace and unification and fulfillment. And spiritual psychology, in the way that I practice it, combines the ancient healing and wisdom traditions of shamanism and Buddhist philosophy with the best of Western psychology in a powerful approach that addresses the mind, the body, and the spirit. Modern Western psychology was kind of founded by Sigmund Freud, who was an Austrian neurologist who lived from 1856 to 1939. And he developed a practice called psychoanalysis, which was treating people's mental and emotional disorders by dialoguing between the patient and the psychoanalyst. And through his work, Freud was brilliant. He developed or discovered the idea of the unconscious or the subconscious, that there were aspects of our self-motives driving us that weren't conscious. We all do stuff, feel stuff, act in ways we don't understand. And particularly if those are negative or harmful or destructive, then we want to change them. So Freud was a very intellectual guy. He was also a coke addict, or at least a cocaine user, and a serious tobacco addict. He had mouth cancer, and he continued to smoke until his death. I personally love both cocaine and cigarettes, and although I haven't done either in a really long time, it brings Freud a little nearer and dearer to my own heart. Anyway, psychoanalysis and a lot of Western psychology is primarily intellectually based. And the idea is that if you can understand something, then that heals or changes it. And understanding things can certainly change our relationship with them, but my own experience was such that knowing what the problem was did nothing to actually create positive, constructive change in my life. I grew up in a house where there was a proverbial elephant in the living room no one talked about, and the elephant in the room was shitting all over the floor and stomping on the furniture, at least energetically and emotionally. There was no physical violence in my house, but there was tremendous codependency and manipulation, fear, and passive aggression. And I was a raging addict starting at the age of 12. The first time I drank, an alcoholic was born. And luckily, the first time I was introduced to spiritual community, a recovering person was born. And so from my perspective, Western psychology names the elephant. And we could talk about all of its parts. There's its legs. Oop, there's its poop. Oh, look, it smashed the furniture. And certainly naming things is really important. Bringing that unconscious into the conscious is a big shift. And so we name the elephant, and we write down all those names in a book we call the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. And much of Western psychology offers an intellectual understanding and approach that's generally based in the idea that our thoughts create our feelings and that there's a big biological component to what's happening. And the psychopharmaceutical industry makes literally billions of dollars from that paradigm. And medication absolutely can be helpful for a lot of people. I'm not anti-medication, so we can name the elephant and we can medicate it, but you still have a fucking elephant in your living room. In my experience of spiritual psychology, in the many forms I have participated as a client and now as a practitioner, is that we can actually work with that elephant directly and maybe even escort it out of the house altogether, or maybe leave that old house and build a new one for ourselves. Lots of different options. So in the early days of my own personal growth work, talk therapy helped me a lot. The first time I walked into a therapy office, the guy asked me, "What do you want to work on?" And I said, "I want to get feelings. I don't have any." It didn't take me long to discover that I had plenty of feelings, and they had been running my life. And I had been medicating them as best I could myself with drugs, alcohol, food, and emotionally unavailable men. Not necessarily in that order. And coming to understand that my mother was the adult child of an alcoholic and was emotionally underdeveloped herself, as was my father, who was a very sweet and lovely man, but the emotional equivalent of probably an 8-year-old. And naming that I had insecure attachment, multiple addictions, and chronic anxiety, bouts of major depression, bordering on a mild bipolar disorder, with some personality disorder from being raised by a narcissist. And all those fancy words did was make me feel bad and broken. I came to love the therapeutic process of someone offering me unconditional love and their full attention with only my highest good in mind and no motives of their own. I've been in therapy pretty consistently for over 30 years. I still have a therapist. In fact, right now I have 2. One of them operates as an intuitive, which is very interesting. And another podcast, as I continue to explore and develop my own intuition, which we all have. But I think that all humans benefit tremendously from wise counsel, or from a mentor or advisor who has perspective and experience, and our personal development and fulfillment as the goal. So I've been through lots of different kinds of therapy. My first really powerful therapeutic experience was with a Jungian psychologist, and Carl Jung was a student of Sigmund Freud and really saw the limitations of Freud's purely intellectual experience. And Jung was also brilliant. They had a really violent breakup. And Jung really became the father of transpersonal psychology. He worked a lot with dreams, and where a lot of more intellectual Freudian-based psychology looks at what's wrong with a person, from a transpersonal perspective, optimally we look at what's right about a person. And it particularly leans into this idea that we're connected to something greater than ourselves. And Jung worked a lot with stories and mythology, with archetypes, and these kind of similarities within the human experience and the wisdom they might call from us that seem to be consistent as far back as there's human records of storytelling and seeking progress or personal growth. So again, I've benefited a lot from Western psychology, but there was a limit to where it could bring me, and holistic, transpersonal, or spiritual psychology opened the door to the unlimited potential of the universal life force of God. And we're all a part of that. That's why we named our new venture Open Door. We want to open the door of our awareness and our experience to that infinitely creative, emergent, tremendously healing and empowering spiritual reality that's available to all of us, that we're actually all a part of, whether we consciously are aware of it or not. And so for me, spiritual psychology is about bridging the gap between our rational mind and the non-rational experiences of emotions and relationships, of energy and body-felt awareness, so that we can be more whole, healthy, and happy. The answers and guidance and power for healing really are available to all of us within if we know how to open that door and have that conversation. And there's many different ways to practice spiritual psychology. The tools that I find most helpful are guided imagery, hypnotherapy, body-based mindfulness, and the shamanic journey. That those tools allow us to make direct connection with our own highest self, this transpersonal realm or the god or goddess of your own understanding. And these really grounded tools provide form and language that we need to face and be able to heal our inner demons. Demons being the fears, the depressions, anxieties, unresolved emotional wounds, rage, that are the roots of our pain and dysfunction. And once something can have a form or become concrete in our active imagination, we can work with it directly to dramatically improve and transform our relationship with ourselves, with others, and with the world at large. And my experience is that when we resolve our underlying emotional and spiritual problems, those inner demons that caused our suffering unravel and dissolve. And in their place, we connect with spiritual allies, however we understand that. And we can then have the support, the nourishment, and the empowerment we need to express our authentic self in the world and pursue the joy and fulfillment that are our birthright. Maybe we train that elephant, start our own circus. Maybe we bring it back to the wild, release it in the jungle. Maybe it dissolves. Maybe we become friends. It's different for every person. We really are each a truly unique expression of the larger consciousness system, each with our own experience to have here. That's why I'm endlessly fascinated with this work. I am a student of humanity. Every client I have is my teacher. So I got my degree in transpersonal psychology, master's degree from John F. Kennedy University here in California. And I decided midway through that program to not pursue getting licensed as a marriage and family therapist. That the Board of Behavioral Therapy, that's the overseeing board for therapists in California, was primarily rooted in Western psychology, which I didn't totally believe in. And concurrent with the 3 years I spent in graduate school, I was cleaning houses. I had a house cleaning business for 11 or 12 years and loved cleaning houses. I like to say I went from cleaning houses to helping people clean their psyches. And right after I started graduate school, I was cleaning the house of a new client, and she told me that she was a therapist. And I told her I was in graduate school and exploring different therapeutic modalities. And she said, "Oh, I do hypnotherapy." And I said, "Oh, can we trade some work?" And she had developed a work she called depth hypnosis. And she became my therapist and primary spiritual teacher for 14 years. Dr. Isa Gucciardi of the Foundation of the Sacred Stream. Of course, the foundation didn't exist. I was in the first class she taught. It was in her garage in 2000, 2001. And it was the most powerful transformative therapy work I had ever experienced. Blend of shamanism and hypnotherapy, doing soul retrieval, deep inner child work, power exchange. And I knew this was how I wanted to practice. And I knew from a Western psychology perspective, those things that I found most beneficial, transformative, and healing, they considered New Age woo-woo bullshit. It was a long, slow path for me as a very skeptical New Englander to open up to all this drum beating, sage burning, spiritual stuff myself. But the proof was in the work. And I felt change after one session that was more powerful than years of talk therapy had provided. Experience can make us open-minded. And so I decided not to get licensed, and that felt in integrity, that I answered to a much higher power than the Board of Behavioral Therapy that changes its laws and opinions every few years. So I recently got an email from the Board of Professional Development in California, the oversight board of practitioners and contractors, anybody who needs a license to practice to be able to protect the public from charlatans and malpractice and poor workmanship. And I found out that I can't use the word psychology as it's usually spelled, with the P-S-Y-C-H. It's against the law as a non-licensed person to purport myself as a psychologist, even though I never say I'm a psychologist. I call myself a therapist and a shamanic healer because that feels accurate. But anyway, it was an interesting couple-week process, challenging my integrity and perhaps my ability to practice. And the idea of, do I need to be certified by someone else to do what I do in the world? Does someone else's approval make me a better practitioner? And so integrity is incredibly important to me. I never want to misrepresent myself. And as I sat with that word psychology, I can't unknow what I know with a master's degree in psych. And Western psychology certainly does influence my work, family systems, attachment issues. I'm aware of those things. I've never had interest in diagnosing people because I don't find that to be helpful. But as I sat with that word, psychology, I came to the same conclusion I came to when I decided not to pursue licensure 20 years ago, which is that I don't actually practice psychology in the way that it's spelled. And so after lots of contemplation, meditation, and conversation, someone came up with the brilliant idea of changing the way it's spelled. And so I did. Psi-Kology. P-S-I-K instead of P-S-Y-C-H. And I like the PSI because PSI stands for pounds per square inch, which is the force that we exert in the world. And PSI also points to the transpersonal. Psi is also a Greek letter, and in physics it's used to represent wave functions in quantum mechanics. I like the definition of integrity when my thoughts and my feelings and my actions are all in line, and the idea that challenges or problems can be opportunities. And so I practice spiritual psychology my own way, spelled my own way, and that feels in integrity for me. And I responded back to the Board of Professional Development and told them I would change my website spelling because those laws are there for a reason and I don't disrespect them. So if you want to find out how spiritual psychology might benefit you in your life or find out more about my 3-month mentorship program, you can shoot me an email, info@reneemckenna.com. My book, workbook, and guided audio series, Allies and Demons, Working with Spirit for Power and Healing, is available on Amazon. There's a link in the show notes. And you can check us out on Instagram @OpenDoorGrowth. Deep gratitude to my supporters on Patreon, and blessings on your path until we meet again. This is Renee Lavallee Mckenna for Spiritual Psychology.